frustration.
What are we doing?
Absolutely inexcusable.
Exasperation.
You can't make this stuff up. I just don't have it in me anymore.
Confusion.
I just don't know what the problem is.
Elation.
Yes, it was a beautifully thrown ball.
We're ready. We're all ready.
Vikings Vet Line. It's your chance to react to the game.
1 hour before the game and immediately after the game.
Vikings Vet Line.
Not going to let my emotions get carried away.
Everyone needs to calm down.
On 1500 ESPN. Let it out.
Typical Vikings.
TCL is a proud sponsor of the 1500 ESPN studios. TCL, America's fastest growing TV brand.
For those who simply can't get enough talk about the Vikings, we present Bonus Chatter. Bonus chatter about your favorite team that's unscripted, unfiltered, and uninterrupted. This is another edition of 1500 ESPN's Purple Podcast.
Hello, welcome to another episode of the Purple Podcast. Matthew Coller here, along with former NFL quarterback Sage Rosenfels. Sage, you've had time to break it all down. You've looked at all the All-22 tape, and I've got a few questions for you. But first, the Minnesota Vikings are playing at Lambeau Field this week, and I want to ask you if you know your career statistics at Lambeau Field.
Well, that is a very good question. I believe I played at Lambeau. I believe I played on teams that played there, I think 4 times. I'm not positive on that. And I believe my career statistics there were 0 for 2. This would have been in 2002. I was with the Miami Dolphins, and Jay Fiedler, who was our starter, had gotten hurt the week or so before. Ray Lucas, who was the backup, was starting the game, and I was a third string, so I was moved up to number 2. Ray got hurt. I came in, I believe, near the end of the second quarter. Norv Turner was my offensive coordinator. Mike Shula was my quarterback's coach. My first pass, I believe, was to Chris Carter, or maybe that was my second pass. I don't know. But Chris Carter was on our team, during that time. We had just signed him. So, yes, I believe 0 for 2.
You are so close. It was 0 for 3, but
even worse.
That is an impressive amount of detail. Well, your quarterback rating at that time was higher than Nathan Peterman's was last week, so you're still good.
Is it 39.7 or something? Is sort of like if you don't complete a pass. At least I didn't throw any interceptions.
Yes, 39.3, and Nathan Peterman's was 0.0. So you at least had a better day than him. What is it like to go into that stadium, to look around, all the history there? I mean, does it matter to you guys, or is it just another field with grass on it?
No, it's cool. You know, as an NFL player, and in particular myself, I grew up watching a lot of football and following the NFL. And when you're going to the stadiums that have sort of special history and a lot of great games and historic games have played there. And, Lambeau, of all the NFL stadiums, it's sort of the stadium that has the most history. So, when you're walking to a special place. I mean, There's interesting aspects about playing in Dallas just because it's huge. It's the Jerry Dome. It's probably going to be a primetime game. But there's something sort of, wholesome or salt of the earth, something when you go into Lambeau and the small town feel. You're driving through neighborhoods to get to the stadium. People are parked in, people's driveways and on people's yards. It sort of reminds me of like a college atmosphere in a lot of ways. And I tell you what, and I don't know, Vikings fans have their own view of it, but from my perspective, actually some of the friendliest fans around the league. I'm sure they're not all friendly, but, believe me, compared to the Philadelphia Eagles fans, in which they actually tell your family members to not wear your jersey or the away team's colors, when you walk into the stadium, the people from Green Bay are pretty dang nice.
Yeah, I was able to see that in Philly up close for the NFC Championship game last year. And we tried on the radio to warn people, the media, that it was on TV. If you're going to the game, don't wear your purple. People ignored that and got full beers thrown in their direction. So, that is not going to happen to them this week in Green Bay.
And it is, as I said, it's a special place, that field, and I love the fact that they keep it grass. I know it gets beat up at the end of the year, but, I was just at the Iowa State game this past week and obviously following my Cyclones and playing at Iowa, right? So, the state of Iowa, we feel like we can we're the agriculture state. We feel like we can grow anything anywhere, and yet Iowa has an artificial turf field, you know. So I'm like, man, I wish they could have grass here. It just seems like in the Midwest you should be playing football on grass. And so I do love the fact that outdoors at Lambeau, they do keep that a grass field, even if it gets beat up at the end of the year.
Although I would say about Soldier Field, maybe turf that thing, right?
Well, I think that's or not have the city of Chicago responsible for it. I think that's probably the number one problem, is that the city of Chicago is responsible for keeping up Soldier Field. Well, it's just not going to be done, you know, as well. So that's another issue. So, but yeah, Green Bay and Lambeau, it's a special place. One of my fondest memories, obviously, was in that 2009 season when Favre was coming back to Lambeau for the first time, and I always made it a point, and I get to tell this story every once in a while. I made it a point when we ran out of the tunnel for the first time for warm-ups that I made sure I ran right behind Brett Favre, because I just knew there'd be a lot of cameras, a lot of pictures being taken, a lot of video being taken of Favre sort of re-entering Lambeau Field, and sure enough, I have a great picture at home here with me running right behind him, wearing my number 2 and him his number 4.
Man, that's awesome. Do you remember what that was like, the lead up to that week, and just what Brett was going through, knowing that he was coming back?
Well, and you could tell Brett took certain games a little more serious. You know, the guy he tried to be the sort of happy-go-lucky, you know, sort of screwed around a little bit and, you know, joyful guy. But you could tell in games like that he was just a little more serious throughout the week. Spent more time watching film, spent more time on Friday, staying later and later and later in the day. And actually, in that game, before the game in the locker room, he was extremely nervous. I mean, hand shaking, you know, type of nervous. And it'd be something I sort of never forget, sitting next to him in the locker room and just witnessing how I almost thought he was going to have like a physical breakdown. It wasn't because he was nervous that, you know, we were going to lose or whatever. I think it had more to do with, you know, he had so many crazy games in that stadium that, I think he felt this pressure to sort of live up to being Brett Favre at Lambeau Field and trying to do something really special that night. And he played great. He played almost a perfect game. We won. It was a really good ball game, but sort of early Aaron Rodgers, obviously. And Jared Allen got to him a number of times. Our defense played really, really well. And that was obviously a huge, huge win for us about midseason.
Man, what was it about Brett that made him able to do that, it seemed like? Whenever there was some sort of big conversation about him and he was in the spotlight, he kind of always was, but when it was elevated, and I'm thinking of that game in Oakland, you know, when his dad passes away, and that was one of my favorite sports memories ever, was watching him do that. It just seems like some guys have a knack for that, doesn't it?
Yeah, you know, he didn't play the game fearful, and I think that's when we talk about, or you hear all the time, whether it's on ESPN or NFL Network, we're talking about these young quarterbacks. I get interviewed throughout the week. You know, what did you think of Sam Darnold last night? Young rookie QB, this, that, and the other. When you can find guys that aren't scared to make mistakes, and that's really, really important. You know, we talk about trying to get these quarterbacks to execute the offense well and eliminate mistakes, and I feel like sometimes you sort of put them in this really conservative mode in which then they never sort of loosen up and make plays. And the great quarterbacks are the ones, I mean, you talk about Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson, even Tom Brady. Those guys aren't really scared to make mistakes. They're looking for opportunities to make positive things happen. So when Brett played, I don't think he looked at, oh, man, this coverage is not good for the route combination. I felt like he was always trying to figure out a way to make a positive play or a big play every time he put the ball in his hands.
Man, that's exactly what I liked in college about two of the young quarterbacks that came out, Mahomes and Sam Darnold, that both of them seemed to have that baller type of mentality, that they weren't afraid. And sometimes with Darnold, as we saw against Detroit, that led to a pick six of him throwing the ball across the field. And I'm sure with Patrick Mahomes at times that he's going to have that. But both of those guys just have like a different sort of moxie to them than most other young quarterbacks.
Yeah, and over the course of their career, they're going to throw a lot of pick sixes. They're going to lose football games. They're going to lose probably playoff football games because of them making a mistake. But they'll be much better off, in my opinion, of going out there and trying to be more of a playmaker. You know, when I was with Christian Ponder in New York at the end of my career, he was a guy that was really scared to make a mistake. He really just was trying to execute the offense so badly that he never really let it loose and let his natural talent go. He was actually a fairly good thrower and he was a good athlete, but I feel like he could never really quite let it go. He didn't want to make a mistake, and he was sort of overly just trying to execute. And Favre was a great executor for sure, but when something wasn't there, man, the guy could really make some things happen.
If you have never seen the John Gruden sit down with Brett Favre, I suggest that everyone watch it. It's so good because he talks about his mentality and stuff like that, and the throws that he believed in himself that he could make. Where usually it's I think he was talking about like a cover two, and you're not supposed to throw it right in front of the safety, but he didn't care because he knew he could make that throw. So it's really interesting if you get a chance.
Well, Favre is really good about understanding how the defense was going to move based off of the offense action. When you line up under center, you got to run to your left. He understands that all those linebackers, as soon as the ball was snapped and the entire line and tight ends and backs were all going to their left, that those linebackers were going to shift, I guess, to their right, but to the quarterback's left as well. They're going to go with that flow, which then opens up sort of a backside slant. And you sort of saw that he was sort of very early on one of those quarterbacks that would, sort of a true RPO back in there, run play. And then he would just sort of tell the receiver, hey, your backside here, just run a one-step slant, and I can hit you in that little hole there when that Sam linebacker is, trying to work his way down the line to stop the run.
That's interesting you bring that up because that's in the Gruden sit-down with him. That's one of the things that they talk about was kind of him thinking about that in practice and seeing it and trying to put it in on the fly a little bit during a game. We're just saying to a receiver, hey, if you see this, then run that slant and I'll hit you for it. And it would work. And his ability to kind of adapt himself out there, it goes beyond like what you're talking about for quarterbacks being afraid. Like it seemed like he was even unafraid to just go out there and say, I see something on the fly and I'm going to change it, which...
Yeah, in the world of football coaching, and I think, football coaches are different than basketball coaches or some other sports. Football coaches, because of just there's so many players and there's so much execution and so many aspects of the team game, even defensively, everybody has to be in the perfect gap assignment. Everyone has to do your job. But so coaches don't like sort of giving up control. But when you coach Brett Favre, you had to realize you're going to have to give up some control. He's going to be right, probably 8 out of 10 times, maybe 9 out of 10 times. But the one he's wrong is you're going to want to pull your hair out. But they're right so often, the players like that. And I believe you brought up Patrick Mahomes earlier. I do believe that Andy Reid is a perfect guy for him because he is one of those guys with huge talent, athletic ability, but the huge arm, obviously, and looks like so far through one game pretty dang accurate. So the worst thing to do to Mahomes would be try to sort of stick him into a small box and be overly perfectionist on his exact footwork and things like that. So let the boy loose for a while and see how he does. But you're just going to have to realize there's going to be some bumps along the way. But in the long run, you want a quarterback who's always aggressive, and that's the way Aaron Rodgers plays.
I love the comparison to basketball because I remember earlier this year Cheryl Reeve talking about how when Maya Moore shoots a contested shot, it's still a better shot than most people would ever take because she is who she is. And we saw that from all of the greatest basketball players ever. I mean, Kobe Bryant would be criticized for all the tough shots that he took, but a lot of them went in because he's just so much better at basketball than everybody else. And I'm sure that he would drive Phil Jackson crazy, Michael Jordan the same thing, but those people are on just a different level, so you have to approach them differently. And I think that Andy Reid was Favre's quarterback coach. Was that right?
Yeah, yep. At one time, early on, I think John Gruden was also on that staff. A lot of coaches from that tree on that staff. And speaking of Green Bay, this week's game, which we'll sort of see what happens with Aaron Rodgers, but I think that's been a big topic of conversation the last couple of days. Is how effective is Aaron Rodgers when he sort of has to stay in the pocket and be more like a traditional quarterback, more of a Tom Brady who can't really move around all that much. And and can't make all those plays. I saw a stat that since Aaron Rodgers has been in the league, he has thrown more touchdown passes out of the pocket than anybody else in the NFL, which makes a lot of sense. And so, there's just no way. I just could not imagine him, sort of being back to, fully healthy after that injury on Sunday, to be fully healthy this weekend. So he's going to be a pocket passer, which is, I'd be really interested to hear about what Mike Zimmer is talking to, with his blitzing linebackers and with his D linemen about how they want to, rush him. Because before, you got to be really careful about Rodgers buying extra time. And sometimes that means like not even rushing quite as hard because you don't want to get, past him where then he can step up and move around and make things happen. But now he can't really go anywhere. So you got to think they're talking about really trying to collapse that pocket from the inside. And then with the, Everson Griffin and the pass rushers on the outside.
Lucky's 13 Pubs has you covered for the best game day experience this football season. Tons of TVs, legendary appetizers, amazing fresh half-pound burgers, handcrafted sandwiches, and a wide variety of other pub favorites. The drink menu is awesome, too. Huge selection of tap beer, handcrafted cocktails, and the best Bloody Marys in town. Seriously, these Bloodies are awesome. Try the Bacon Bloody, the Jalapeno Bloody, the Mother Mary, or just get a flight and try them all. Plus, Lucky's 13 celebrates Sunday Fun Day. Happy hour all day long on Sunday, every Sunday. Events and prize giveaways during games, too. Lucky's 13 has locations in Bloomington, Burnsville, Mendota, Plymouth, and Roseville. Having people over for the game? Call ahead to Lucky's and order some of those legendary apps, and they'll be ready to bring home when you get there. It's football time at Lucky's 13 Pubs. Find them online at luckys13pub.com. luckys13pub.com. It's the most wonderful time of the year, football time. And Lucky's 13 Pubs has you covered for the best game day experience. luckys13pub.com.
How is it that Aaron Rodgers is so good at understanding what's going on in front of him with the offensive line and his protection? I mean, it seems like nobody is able to shuffle their feet 2 steps one way or the other to get him those extra seconds, because some quarterbacks, it seems like the rush is just on them all the time, and then with him, he just has that same thing as Tom Brady does where he can find those little holes in the pocket.
It's magical. It really is. And as much as Viking fans, don't love hearing it, the guy is absolutely incredible. There's nothing else like him. I think he and Brady both have this. They both don't have fear, right? There's something about when you're a young guy, when you're a guy trying to earn your stripes, even when you're a guy who's making 16 or 18 million a year, and you're one of those sort of 20th, the Andy Dalton types, Ryan Tannehill types. There is this fear of screwing up, holding the ball too long, the sack fumble concern. But guys like Brady and guys like Aaron Rodgers just don't have that concern of sort of failure and screwing up, and so that allows them to be a little more free. And they've been doing it for so long that Aaron Rodgers' pocket movement, ability to slide around, and sometimes it's on purpose. I truly believe when it's 3rd and 10 plus, if his first read is not there, he's not going to check the ball down. He's going to then try to buy time. It's almost like a Hail Mary, and you hope that, especially versus zone coverage, that when your guys can just sort of pop open. They say the longer you hold on to the ball versus zone coverage, you have a much, much better chance of somebody coming open at some time. And I think he's been making a nice little niche of doing that. Very untraditional, because the quarterback's coach, the coordinator, say, hey, you're going to go high to low on this. You're going to go deep, with the X on the in route or the comeback route, and then, down to your check downs. Well, he knows on 3rd and longs, those check downs a lot of times aren't going to get first down. So he'll find a way to buy time and try to then work the ball down the field for a first down somewhere else.
Yeah, Harrison Smith talked about that today, and just how difficult that can be to keep track of somebody when you're talking about 3, 4 seconds, 5 seconds. And we even saw a little of that from Case Keenum last year with just buying time and finding someone down the field. Sage, I want to ask you what you saw in some of the all-22 tape that comes out with different angles where you could see every player. And what I've discovered since I've started watching the all-22 tape a few years ago is it is a different game when you watch what everybody did than when you watch on TV or you watch the broadcast back, or even when you're there at the game when you can go back and look for each guy. So there was a couple plays that stuck out to me that I wanted to run by you. The one you wrote about for The Athletic, because you are a media darling now these days, and everybody wants you. But the touchdown to Kyle Rudolph, that looked like a play to me that Zach Ertz did a lot. That same route where he turns his shoulders one way, flips back around to gain some leverage on the safety for a touchdown. What did you see on that one?
Well, there's the tight end. Probably the most common route a tight end runs is what they call a stick route. It's a sort of a 4-yard, 5-yard quick out route. It's great versus zone coverage. It's great versus inside leverage linebackers, generally in sort of a too high safety look. And in this situation, what they call a stick nod. Well, he comes off the ball, he runs that stick route, that quick 5-yard out. And in particular on the goal line where teams try to play the front of the goal line, the safeties, the linebackers, they're really trying to sort of picket fence there across the goal line. So he gets the safety, number 29, I can't think of his name, for the 49ers to stop his feet to sort of come up on that stick route. He has to play that stick route aggressively. You can't really tackle him after the fact. This is, in the end zone basically. Kyle runs a really nice stick route. Makes it look just like the real thing, and then the nod or the sort of the stick and go, and then he it turns up vertically, almost like a seam route. Now, if that was versus a cover 2 look, he would have had to then cross the safety's face and come inside. But in a single safety look, he actually keeps it away from that free safety, sort of underneath the goalpost area, and then up the seam. And there's just no way once you get that defender to stop his feet, you're sort of even, and then you're leaving. And so, once Kyle Rudolph, basically was even with him and the defender has to turn his head, it's over. You just got to throw it up and make an accurate throw. Kirk Cousins does that. And we saw what we saw a lot over the last couple of years. Kyle Rudolph, catching red zone touchdown passes.
Yeah, I'm really blown away by his ability to go up just using his body. He's not much of a jumper, but it seems like anything in his area, using his size and his length, that he's able to get it. And I think that one thing we don't really appreciate him for, because he really catches everything and you just expect that, is the fact that he catches everything. That he had one drop all of last season. It was and you remember it was a play in Carolina where it just kind of went through his hands. But, I mean, for a tight end to have the size that he has and the hands, I think that he is a key part of this offense, not just in the red zone, Sage, but also I noticed watching the game back how much John DeFilippo moved him around. He was sometimes on the line of scrimmage, sometimes in the slot, sometimes as an outside wide receiver, and it seems like he's going to be kind of the linchpin of this offense in that way. Even though he comes away with one catch, he's still being used in so many different ways.
Yeah, the tight end is such a vital position, and I really do think he and Carlson are a really nice combination. They're both pretty good blockers, and they both do a pretty good job in the passing game. And, John DeFilippo, he likes to, and coming from Philly, and usually coordinators sort of go off what their most recent job was, right? If you had success somewhere, you're not going to, wholesale change the offense that you just had success in when you go to a new team. So,
right.
You got to think, and we're going to be talking about this all year, Zach Ertz and that Philly offense. And we'll probably, even Vikings fans probably should, study that Philly offense a little bit when they're watching. The Vikings are going to do a lot of those same things. And so the tight end's important because, they can get a big advantage. One, they can get a big advantage on those linebackers and sort of cover 2 situations where teams are doubling the outside guys, Thielen and Diggs. But number 2, especially if you put a tight end sort of by himself, many times the defense will sort of tell you what they're in. If they're in man-to-man, you're going to have a strong safety or a linebacker, usually a strong safety lined up over the tight end, and then the 2 cornerbacks will then go over to the slot side and cover your wide receivers. So it's a great key as a quarterback when you walk up to the ball. You got tight end on one side and the receivers on the other side. Is it man? Is it zone? Sometimes there's audibles that go on that, but definitely helps in your read. It's hard sometimes to tell the difference between cover 3 and man-to-man pre-snap anymore. A lot of times even that cover 3 zone look, the cornerbacks will be bumped and then bailed. So you can't always tell, but if you walk up to the ball and the corners don't go over, and you now have Richard Sherman covering Kyle Rudolph, and you've got a strong safety over the slot, that's some sort of zone coverage. That's a big advantage for a quarterback.
Yeah, and it seemed like they were using Rudolph in many different ways, motions, things like that. that I think Pat Shurmur was effective with. I think San Francisco and their offense was effective with. As part of being a modern offense, you need that tight end to show you things and to get you mismatches, because even on that same play where he's a wide receiver and Richard Sherman is lined up over him, well, I mean, Sherman is a pretty strong guy, but the normal cornerback, you might have some trouble there facing off with a 6'6", 250-pound tight end. So you might have that advantage. But
there are some aspects of Kyle Rudolph's game that are similar to Gronkowski. Now he's not Gronk,
right?
But there are definitely some aspects to it. The sort of the catch radius, as sort of the term goes nowadays, he can catch everything. We've seen Kyle Rudolph over the years, catch balls by his knees and his ankles, and to probably almost to 10 feet high, going up in the back of the end zone. He was a great high school basketball player for people who don't know. So his catch radius is great. He doesn't have this sort of extreme, 4.45 speed rolling down the field, but he does cover more ground than people realize. He's such a big guy. And again, just the ability to put the ball in the area, and it seems like for the most part, Kyle Rudolph comes down with it.
Well, Sage, I'm really glad that Ray Lucas and Jay Fiedler came up on today's podcast, and I would love to continue this streak of random backup or journeyman quarterbacks who come up. Ray Lucas was great on Madden, dude. I mean, if you used him, that was like pre-Michael Vick on Madden, but you could take Ray Lucas and put him in there, and he was dangerous.
I tell you what, Ray was a good player. He's a big Parcells guy, so that was his roots. He was a Rutgers quarterback. Played for Parcells for the New York Jets. So, originally, you go back to was he with the Patriots? I think, but he was on. He was a special teams player / quarterback.
Was it Jets
during parts of his career? Yeah, well, the Jets, but they was in the Super Bowl. So I think he was also with the Patriots when they went to the Super Bowl back in the Drew Bledsoe days. And so, yeah, Ray was, he was a piece of work, and he does a lot of commentating out there in New York, New Jersey, and. He was a pretty good quarterback.
Yeah, and had great speed, and all you had to do was just roll outside and just take off. And then whoever you were playing hated you for using Ray Lucas. So I'm really glad. Anytime I used all those guys. Seneca Wallace was another guy. Like if there was,
that's my Iowa State guy.
Yeah, right. If there's anybody with speed, then you're using them in some sort of package. I love how, the real NFL is copying what I used to do on Madden. Like, Lamar Jackson's going to be part of packages. It's like, oh, dude, I've been doing that with Ray Lucas since '99.
I think Belichick was studying your old games.
That's right. Happened. He's seen all the tape of everything, including video games. So, Sage, awesome stuff. As always, we will connect again next Monday to break down what happened in Green Bay. Thank you for another great episode, and thank you for listening, all of you, to the Purple Podcast.
Frustration.
What are we doing?
Absolutely inexcusable.
Exasperation.
You can't make this stuff up. I just don't have it in me anymore.
Confusion.
I just don't know what the problem is.
Elation.
Yes, it was a beautifully thrown ball.
We're ready. We're all ready.
Vikings Vet Line. It's your chance to react to the game.
1 hour before the game and immediately after the game.
Vikings Vet Line.
Not going to let my emotions get carried away.
Everyone needs to calm down.
On 1500 ESPN. Let it out.
Typical Vikings.
Florence is coming. I'm Ed Donahue with an AP News Minute. People along the Carolina coast don't have much time left to get out before Hurricane Florence starts bearing down.
Right now it's anxiety and adrenaline to do what we can.
Gary Stiers was boarding up his home in Topsail Beach, North Carolina.
There's not a whole lot we can control at this point, but it's the unknown that we're worried about. And not knowing what's coming and when it'll come and how it'll come.
Florence has been downgraded to a Category 3 storm, but is expected to strengthen again. Landfall isn't expected until Saturday. Stephanie Force in Wilmington, North Carolina, remembers damage from Hurricane Floyd.
We had flooding out where I lived. I lost everything, and it's hard to get out and it's hard to get back in, so this time I'm going a little bit further inland just to be safe.
Current forecast models have Florence shifting south, closer to South Carolina. Previously, North Carolina was forecast to be more at risk. I'm Ed Donahue.